Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We've got a couple of really important stories that we're going to bring you about the political landscape here in Kentucky. Then we're going to check in with Kentucky Center for Economic Policy's Dustin Pugel to discuss how the House GOP passed reconciliation bill would decimate Medicaid recipients in rural hospitals across our commonwealth. But before we do that, are you ready to help create a more compassionate Commonwealth? You found us on the internet. Congratulations. You're here for a reason. It's probably not for, I don't know. It's because you care about Kentucky politics. I'm guessing. I'm going out on a limb here. It's because you care about Kentucky politics, right? It's not because of our fancy production values. It's not for just how polished we are. It's because you care. So you know that we are in a spot where we need significant political change in Kentucky. To get significant political change, we need long-term power building. We need to plug more voters into the races that really matter. So if you like our governor, but you can't stand what the GOP supermajority in Frankfort's done with their power, we hope you'll support Progress Kentucky in our effort to fix that. So right now, we are laser focused on fighting back against Trump's MAGA regime. More on that later. We need your help. So please make a monthly contribution right now via our secure online website, Act Blue, to help turn Kentucky purple. $10, $20, $200. It all adds up. If you can make it monthly, even better. But yeah, please do check out Act Blue. It's a really easy tool to use. It gives us the resources we need, and some resources would be very useful right now. We've had some increases in prices. We definitely, we have to pay for the streaming service we use to bring you Kernels of Truth every month. So really, every week. We pay monthly, and we'd love to have some additional resources to kind of project the show out there on the digital landscape so more eyeballs and ear holes get a hold of it and use the information to make political change here in Kentucky. So anything you can do absolutely helps out. We've had a number of new monthly sustainers sign up, which is really awesome. We appreciate everyone who has done that. But yeah, if you thought about it, now is a great time to do it. There's a link in the comments, so you can head right over there and make it happen. So now let's go ahead and check in with our co-hosts. Let us know who you are, where you are, and most importantly, what does your protest sign say today? And so I'm Aaron. I'm coming to you right now from just outside Brainerd, Minnesota, where I'm here for a conference, usually hanging out in Lexington, Kentucky. But now I'm in Brainerd, Minnesota, where the internet is a little spotty. So we'll see what happens today. But my protest sign says there's nothing beautiful about it. So now let's go ahead and check in with our co-host, Kimberly. Kimberly, are you there?
I sure am, Aaron. How are you doing this evening? How are you doing? How are you doing today?
I'm all right. How about you?
Could be better. Could have some good news coming through, would make it a lot better. But my protest sign says today, since we're all fed up, let's vote these people out.
Nice. Since we're all fed up, let's vote these people out. Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. We got a minute. We got a minute before we can do it. I wish we had snap elections in the U.S. That would be cool. But we've got, 17 months to go or something like that before we could do anything to change the political landscape. So hold on to your fed upness, put it to work in the next 17 months, and we'll see what we can do. All right? All right?
I agree with you.
Okay.
I like some of them we can get out this November.
Who can we get out this November?
I don't know. Why'd you ask me that off the cuff?
You brought it up. All right. So hey, you've been active, busy the last couple of days. What have you been up to? What were you doing?
I was speaking and attending the State of the People Power Tour. And basically, it was all about community engagement, involvement, and political ignorance in the Black American communities. So it is a 10-city tour, and you have the great Angela Rye. People may know her from CNN. You had Dr. Jamal Bryant. I think we all know him. He and Angela were the ones that started the mass protest of certain stores that got rid of the DEI. Yeah,
Oh, awesome.
Tamika Mallory, a great activist. She was here many, many times during the civil rights movement of 2020, right here in Louisville on the Breonna Taylor. So it was exciting. It was a lot of classes, a lot of knowledge, and I feel like I came out a better person.
Oh, that's so awesome. How did you get pulled into that? Like, what a great opportunity for you to be, in the middle of doing some really important stuff. How did they know to get hold of you?
Just last minute.
Yeah.
Because, people might know me a little bit, Aaron. I'm not famous, but, hey.
Infamous, certainly.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. Well, that's really cool. I'm glad you got a chance to do that. And I hope that, it looks like they're going to do recaps for the event. So if you go to the website, we put it in the chat there. You can check out State of the People Power Conference. All right. Sounds more universally interesting than the conference I'm at, just to be clear. But we're not going to get into that one. All right. So let us go though into news of the week. I am trying to protest. I'm trying to produce at the same time I talk to you. That rarely goes well, just to be super clear about it. I think somehow, somewhere, we have like I don't know where it is. I don't even see it over here. There's supposed to be a sign that we can
You
use.
could walk and chew bubblegum at the same time.
can't.
You're my little brother. You could do anything and everything.
I appreciate your faith, but I'm not sure that it's warranted. Wait, maybe here. Let's see. Oh yeah, look, found it. News of the week. Very exciting. The first story. I'm gonna try to talk about this one. So this is big news here, coming out of Frankfort, really coming out of Eastern Kentucky. So where Senator Robin Webb, who has been a long time Democrat, has just left the party. Left the party last week. Of course, she got out the tired old statement. No, she didn't leave the party. The party left her. I don't think she said anything about trans people or trans kids in her statement, but I definitely felt like it was alluding to kind of the culture war stuff that, of course, these aren't the issues that the Democratic Party brings up. It's what the Republican Party brings up to make the Democratic Party respond to it as they try to be mean to trans kids, right? So I don't know. Here's the statement. I want to get your take on it, Kimberly. So Senator Webb, here's the quote, and this is coming from KDB Chairman Coleman Eldridge. Senator Webb has chosen to join a political party that is currently working around the clock to take health care away from over 1 million Kentuckians, wipe out our rural hospitals, take food off the table of Kentucky families, and take resources away from our public schools. Those are her priorities. Then we agree she isn't a Democrat. Again, KDB Chairman Coleman Eldridge, Democratic floor leader Gerald Neal, and this story is coming to us from of course, the Kentucky Lantern. But he said, her decision will not change the course and diligence with which the Democratic caucus has and will continue to operate. Okay. Added that his caucus looks forward to continuing to work with Senator Webb and all our Republican colleagues to make Kentucky a better place to live, work, and raise a family. The Democratic caucus remains committed to working to bring Kentucky a brighter future by fully funding public education, protecting workers' rights, and fighting for the well-being of Kentucky's families, Neal said. We will continue to support investments in job training and workforce development, expand access to affordable health care, provide solutions to food insecurity, establish affordable housing initiatives, prepare for and effectively manage disaster response, and ensure responsible budgeting for the Commonwealth. All right. And then the story finishes up. The lone Democrat in the mountains is now Rep. Ashley Tackett Lafferty of Martin, Kentucky. So the only Democrat on Eastern Kentucky is Rep. Ashley Tackett Lafferty of Martin. So yeah, it's I think it's unfortunate that she chose to leave. I think there's been a lot of folks who criticized Coleman Eldridge's statement. I don't know, Kimberly, what kind of how it hits you, but I struggle and I wrestle with the right tone and the right information to put in your statement. I think Coleman put mostly the right information in there. I think his tone was a bit harsh, and some people said that he, sounds like a kid who, got, broken up with on the playground and, just not responding terribly well. I don't think you need to be super conciliatory to somebody who left your party, but I do think, pointing out what are the differences between the Democrats and the Republicans. I think Coleman's statement very much underscores, what the Trump mega regime is trying to do in Washington, D.C. And I think because it's so hard for Democrats to break through in Eastern Kentucky, which is, I think, one of the reasons that this is happening, right? The local media bubble, the kind of Fox News bubble. I think, he probably thought, this is one of our best chances to actually get a statement to Eastern Kentucky voters. This story's going to get covered. What am I going to say with it? So I don't know that I don't think his tone was awesome, but I think the information he put into that statement was right. The MAGA regime is trying to do horrible things and people need to know it. And I think if she's willing to kind of go along and like, oh yeah, I need to sign up with Trump as he looks to defund Medicaid, like it just seems like, or make massive cuts to Medicaid. That just seems like an issue worth underscoring with probably your best chance to break through to key voters in those key areas. So I don't know. That's my way of rationalizing the response. I think a lot of people wanted to pile on Coleman for the statement, but I certainly understand some measure of kind of where he's coming from. What do you think about that, Kimberly?
Well, number one, people should not jump ship because a lot of Democrats voted for her, maybe because she was a Democrat. You should not be able to jump ship during your time in office for that particular, what's the word I'm looking for, Aaron? For that particular, not session, but that time that you're in, that you're elected for. Okay.
Yeah.
That's number one. Because if I vote for you and you're a Democrat and then midway you say, oh, I want to be a Republican, you're doing me wrong.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's not what I voted for. I didn't vote for her, but I'm just saying hypothetically. Number two, as far as Coleman is concerned, he is the chairman of the entire Democratic Party in the entire state of Kentucky. He does not have time to prattle and fluff and all of that. He basically was just telling the truth. Some people can digest it. Some people cannot. Look at her. Don't look at him. He's on the right side of things at this point. Number three, how I think about this is it's very shocking. We do not have the breathing room to lose a Democrat. We are bare boned as it is. As far as the House is concerned and our state Senate is concerned. I really liked what Senator Neal said. Knowing him personally, I know that he's probably really fired up about it. All of us are, to be honest. However, I feel like we need to get Senator Neal on here as soon ASAP to talk a little bit more about that, because is this going to be a trend? Is this a one-off? What's really going on with the Democratic Party there? And she says the party left her. I need for her to speak more about how did the party leave her. That needs to really, really come out in detail and not in general terms. And lastly, I will say this. I said that a lot of people were going to be changing over to become independents. That trend is now happening. I did say that over a year ago, right here on this show. And we've seen a lot of people switch over to become independents. And I just hope that this trend will not continue, that you're a Democrat and you're going to change over to Republican. Because one more thing, I said lastly, but I lied. I said lastly, but I lied. One other thing is this. if she was upset about the transgender um, platform, the abortion platform, most of Americans are somewhat in the middle of everything. I do believe in free choice, pro choice. However, if someone came to me and told me that they were pregnant, abortion wouldn't be the first option that I would talk about, but that could be on the table. And I hold no resentment or remorse or judgment about that person. Um, there are a lot of people that believe in all of our tenets in the party. However, it might be one or two that might not be your jam, so to speak. If that's if that's not your jam, it's not your jam. But the main thing is we need her votes for anything. We need her assistance. So hopefully Senator Neal knows her a lot better than what we do. So when he said he willing to continue to work with her, maybe he knows a little bit more about this than what we do. So that's where I am at this particular moment, Aaron, on this situation. It's very heartbreaking. The news just it just continues on to be one thing after another. But the second thing is my story, actually, and it is about I call it the BB bill. Trump calls it, and they call it in DC, the big, beautiful bill, which there is absolutely nothing beautiful about it. It's one of the most ugliest bills that we have seen within our lifetime, taking everything away from Americans, basically. And they're also talking about putting us in debt $5 more trillion. And I didn't say millions or billions. I said $5 more trillion. I thought we were supposed to be cutting money, not spending money. So this is really what happened yesterday. Mr. Elon Musk, right after, his retirement, leave, whatever you want to call it, he pulled no punches on Tuesday in slamming the Republican Party for passing President Donald Trump's big, beautiful budget bill through the House, urging everyone who voted for it to be fired next November. Musk, he made the comments just days after leaving his role in the Trump administration with a friendly send-off in the Oval Office. While rallying against the bill on Tuesday, Musk shared a post from X user slamming the GOP and replied, "In November next year, we fire all politicians who betrayed the American people." So, Musk is making these bombastic comments in reply to a user who wrote, "Okay, let me just get this straight. The GOP are out there spending millions on luxury hotels in Ukraine, not voting on any Doge cuts, spending 60% of their time on vacation, not codifying executive orders. Is this the major reform the American people voted for?" So the Tesla billionaire called to remove the entire House GOP, except for Kentucky's very own Representative Thomas Massey and also Republican Warren Davidson out of Ohio. This came after he called the House bill a disgusting abomination earlier in that day. A disgusting abomination. Well, we already knew that. So Musk wrote, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it." So Massey, our very own Kentucky's own Massey, had vehemently opposed the bill ahead of its passing the House in mid-May, arguing it continued the Pelosi-Biden levels of spending while cutting taxes and adding to the deficit. Also, our very own Kentucky's own Senator Rand Paul, Massey's fellow Kentucky libertarian, as they call them, although they are Republicans, posted to X writing, I want to see the tax cuts made permanent, but I also want to see the $5 trillion in new debt removed from the bill. At least 4 of us in the Senate feels this way. Musk shared the post and replied to Senator Rand Paul, thank you. Both Senator Rand Paul and Representative Massey have been targets of Trump's vicious ire in recent weeks, as they have made clear that they will not support his sweeping domestic agenda focused on both cutting taxes and increasing spending. So also the House leader, he also says it's too late to do anything to the bill, that it has to go now to the Senate. Where they believe, most economists, the experts, they believe that it will pass the Senate and it will have effects on Medicaid, the SNAP program, education, and so many other things that are in that bill. That is, like I always say, Aaron, they want us dumb, sick, and poor. This bill proves it.
Yeah, this bill's a mess. There's nothing beautiful about it. As I said earlier, we're going to get into some of the specifics in a moment with our guest, but it is absolutely, I guess the enemy of my enemy is my friend situation. I don't think that, Elon Musk or Rand Paul or, Thomas Massey and I share really any views on this bill, except for the fact that they shouldn't pass it, I guess. So, whatever it takes to kill it. And I'm sorry that my internet totally wonked out there for a minute, and I got kicked off the show. But it's interesting now. This is Jake Sherman from Punchbowl News. He is reporting that a Republican aide said about Elon Musk opposing the reconciliation bill that, quote, the guy that was pro the package until he realized he wasn't going to get his way with the EV tax credits. I don't know if that's accurate. I think that Elon Musk is, fully doged at this point, right? It was his baby to cut as much wasteful, I don't want to use their terms, cut as much spending as humanly possible, not caring about the impacts on government or people. And I think he wanted to see those cuts being made, and so this bill doesn't really do much of that at all. And I think that's kind of most of his motivation, and I pay pretty close attention to the EV tax credits. Tesla wasn't necessarily positioned to get much advantage out of the EV tax credits because they've kind of used a lot of them already, and they've gotten through the production hell that a lot of the other EV manufacturers have not. So it gives them actually a competitive advantage in the EV landscape if other manufacturers don't get the tax credits. So I don't know. It's an interesting fight to watch play out, and I'm more than happy to see Republicans, decimating each other over this bill. But I think, the reality of it is it doesn't really matter what they do. There's not going to get a single Democrat supporting that package at all, right? So we'll see what the Republicans can do about it.
What about the Lincoln Project, what they put on X? The girls are fighting. I thought that was very interesting. The girls are fighting.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why you gotta exactly the point of calling them girls is. I don't really get it. I do get that the Lincoln Project likes to make fun of Trump and whatever it does to try to get under his skin. Like, I'm usually in favor of it, but I don't know if that's necessary. Other ways to make fun of that guy for sure. All right, so let's move on if that's cool with you, Kimberly.
Yes.
We do have just a rock star guest joining us this week, Dustin Pugel, who is with the the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. We have had a number of folks from the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy join us on the show. Jason Bailey a couple of times at least, and Dustin came to my attention because I just saw some great stuff that he was writing about the specifics of the Medicaid cuts that are proposed in that big, huge House reconciliation package. And we wanted to get into it a little bit because it does seem like it's a problem for Kentucky if this stuff becomes law in terms of the spending. So hello, Dustin. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Aaron.
So yeah, let's just get into it. I do want to make sure everyone knows who you are and why we should listen to you. So you've got a great bio. You've been doing this work for a lot of years. You joined the. Let me first tell you a little about the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. You guys launched in 2011 and since grown into an influential voice in the Kentucky policy landscape. Your research is cited frequently in the media and policy debates on wide-ranging issues. You produce timely analysis of key issues and policy options. You promote public conversation about solutions through media and communications and advocate to decision makers on the need for policies that improve the quality of life for all Kentuckians. You're the policy director there. You focus on economic security, health policy, and safety net programs while providing strategic support for the organization's policy campaigns. You joined them in 2015. Previously worked for Build in Lexington, Kentucky, training congregations to identify, research, and advocate for policy solutions on a local level. You also spent 2 years providing policy research assistance for the Commonwealth Council on Developmental Disabilities. You're also founding board member for Neighbors Immigration Clinic. You're currently on the board of the New Americans Initiative, which is an organization dedicated to helping immigrants naturalize and become civically engaged. And we've had the New Americans Initiative on. Nima Kulkarni has been on to talk about it in the past. Really great stuff. You have a BA in history from Asbury University and a master's in public administration from UK. Go Cats. So we should listen to you. You've got the resume that makes me think, yeah, this is a guy we should listen to. So tell us a little bit about what's going on, your analysis of Medicaid cuts that are in this package, and what they would do to our state.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll start with a little bit of history of my career and also this particular bill. So very soon after I started, there was an attempt to overturn the Affordable Care Act, as folks may remember, back in 2017. And that was really my first entrance into federal Medicaid advocacy and analysis. And of course, that whole process ended with that famous thumbs down moment from the late Senator John McCain. And so they shift focus very quickly. And then Leader McConnell said, we're going to focus wholeheartedly on tax cuts. And they got those through. That was the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Well, that bill is now expiring and they have to extend those cuts if they want to keep them. That was sort of the signature achievement of the first Trump administration. And so I think they learned their lesson in not separating those two issues, but combining them into one big, beautiful bill or what have you. And so that's really how we got to this point, is I think they realized that the cuts to these programs are extremely unpopular, and it made particular senators and other legislators vulnerable when it came to voting for them. But if they could combine them with something that is actually, at least on its face popular, certainly popular among the caucus, then they may be able to move it through. So that's how we got to where we are today. That's why we have this one sort of monstrosity that we're dealing with. And for Kentucky, it spells disaster, particularly with the cuts to Medicaid. Medicaid is the backbone of healthcare coverage in Kentucky. It is a significant economic driver. It has had an amazing impact on the health and well-being of Kentuckians, particularly over the last 11 years since we expanded Medicaid in 2014. And so these cuts that are actually not only larger than any previous cut, but actually larger than all previous cuts to Medicaid combined, it would be devastating for Kentucky. It would reduce spending here by about $1.7 billion. And it would lead to up to 350,000 people becoming uninsured. And that doesn't say anything about what they're doing about the marketplace, which is, we call it Connect here. There are these subsidies. You can go buy individual health insurance plans. They're not going to extend these boosted subsidies that were enacted under the Biden administration. And so there's an additional 47,000 people who may lose coverage under that. So we're talking about close to 1 in 10 Kentuckians losing health insurance over the next 10 years if this thing passes. And unfortunately, the value of the tax cuts that we would see on the other side of that is not going to reach those folks. It would be minimal at best, and they're going to be left worse off overall if this moves through.
Wow. Yeah, those are huge impacts. And I know that, that idea that, okay, so this stuff isn't popular. If you do it as standalone votes, then, you got people of conscience stepping up and opposing them because it's the right thing to do. Now they've got it all wrapped up with, a reconciliation bill, which they don't get to do but once, maybe twice a Congress, right? Per year. So this is going to be the most consequential, legislation, maybe the only piece of legislation that really, gets passed by this Congress. And it is, it's also got a debt limit extension, right? So if they don't pass something, the federal government shuts down, which also isn't popular. So, the idea that this is one bill that includes an incredible amount of leverage for this Republican Party, and they don't have to have a single Democratic vote to get it across the finish line because you cannot filibuster a reconciliation package, right? So it really is like, you got them in a box and in a bind, and the Democrats, can say all they want to say about it, but they can't really do anything to stop it if the Republicans are aligned. Sounds like they're not. We heard earlier from a couple of Republicans from Kentucky opposing it for issues that we wouldn't necessarily oppose it for. But tell us about why are they? I don't know. Why do folks like Hal Rogers should also be concerned about this, right? Like, it just seems like this is such a big deal for Kentucky. And not about the cost of the bill, but the actual cuts to Medicaid that are proposed in the bill. Why, especially for somebody like Hal Rogers, does this stuff matter?
Well, I mean, I think Congressman Rogers' district is ground zero for the impact of these cuts. Not only is it one of the outright largest Medicaid populations in the country, it also has a significant economic benefit from Medicaid. So, I think a lot of times when we think through what economic development looks like in Eastern Kentucky, we think back to Great Society programs or maybe, certain infrastructure projects. But Medicaid pumps over $2 billion a year, almost $3 billion a year, just into his district alone, directly to Medicaid providers. So think hospitals, substance use disorder clinics, pharmacists. And that money doesn't just sort of sit there, right? That goes into paychecks, that goes into contracts, that goes into facilities, and it echoes throughout their economy. In fact, Medicaid is such a big portion of total spending in the 5th District that it represents about 13.5% of all of their GDP. So the total value of goods and services produced and exchanged in that district originate with Medicaid dollars. That's a huge deal. And so when you start talking about chipping away at that, you're not just talking about people losing coverage, which is very important. And obviously, I think the most critical aspect of this, you're also talking about people losing jobs. You're potentially talking about rural hospitals closing, which doesn't just hurt people on Medicaid, it hurts everyone. I mean, imagine somebody who goes to get their COPD treatment in Hazard. The hospital shuts down there, and now they got to drive to Lexington every time they need a treatment or something like that. I mean, it's a really substantial problem. And I think there are senators who understand that. So, you've got sort of the Mike Lee, Rand Paul caucus around saying, we're not going to vote for anything that includes an increase of the debt ceiling. But then you also have folks like Josh Hawley out of Missouri who are saying, look, if you take coverage away from low-income folks, those are our voters. Those are people that we care about, and those are folks that we depend on as our base. We're shooting ourselves in the foot here, and he's not alone. I mean, I think folks like Shelley Moore Caputo, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, they're all people who are saying, look, Medicaid is important to my district, my state, and so we have to make sure that we protect it. And the cuts that we're talking about here, there's no way to make those cuts and not result in either fewer people covered or higher costs in healthcare.
Mm-hmm. It does seem like a real big problem for Kentucky. Dr. Jones, you got a question for Dustin?
That felt so good, you calling me that, Aaron. Thank you. I'm a newly doctorate, Dustin. That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, my question for you is our wonderful governor, Andy Bashir, he included and made sure that Medicaid recipients in this state had vision and dental care
Mhm.
attached to it. I believe that would possibly be one of the first things that is Xed with Kentucky Medicaid. The second thing also is, um, do you think that we'll be able to keep the Affordable Care Act here in Kentucky? Do you still think that that would be a viable system for everyone? Because even my son, who has a full-time job, he makes decent amount of money, but insurance on his job is astronomical.
Mhm.
So he went on Connect, as you called it, which it is, and received some insurance that was slightly lower. But saving a dollar now, you got to save every penny, right?
Yeah.
Um, those two things. What do you think?
Yeah, that those are great questions. So with Medicaid specifically, I don't necessarily think we're facing specific types of benefits being cut within the program. The way that they're trying to make cuts in Medicaid are, frankly, as politically palatable as possible. And so, what they're really trying to do is trip people up in paperwork, which would result in losing health insurance. There's a couple specific ways they want to do that. First out the gate, there was an eligibility and enrollment rule that would have made it easier to qualify for Medicaid, would have sort of smoothed the way in the application process. They basically nixed that, and CBO thinks that there's a couple million folks who won't be insured because of that. Another way is by doubling the number of times that folks on Medicaid expansion, so that's any adult who's not traditionally eligible, up to 138% of the poverty level. It's about $20,000 for an individual, a little higher than that. So instead of having to prove you're eligible once a year, you're going to have to do it every 6 months. And we know from a couple of years ago when we started redetermining eligibility again after COVID, that about 15% of Medicaid enrollees in Kentucky lost health insurance, not because they were found to be ineligible, but because of what are called procedural errors, which are things like late paperwork or typos, any kind of sort of procedural bureaucratic problem that stems from you're trying to prove that you're still eligible. And then the third way, and frankly, where they generate the most savings is through work reporting requirements. This is what we have in SNAP. Essentially, folks who have no kids, who are young kids in the household, and they don't have a documented disability, they would have to prove that they're working a certain number of hours every week or every month, excuse me, in order to keep their health insurance. Well, we know from the data, like surveys like the current population survey, it's the same survey we use to calculate the unemployment rate, is that more than half of Medicaid enrollees who are adults do work. They work in full or part-time jobs. The remainder are not working for reasonable reasons, right? They're things like they're sick or disabled, they're going to school, they're currently looking for work, or they're retired. Only about 5% of Medicaid adults are not working for some reason that the survey couldn't identify. And that's their so-called target population. There's been other research using other census data to show that far from the notion that there's like an army of, well-built 20-something sitting in their mom's basement playing Xbox instead of working, the typical able-bodied adult without dependents, what they refer to them as, is more likely to be a woman. It's more likely to be someone who doesn't have a high school education, and is more likely to be someone who is out of the workforce because they're caring for a loved one. Those are the folks who are going to be hurt the most from this. They're also more likely to be rural. So going back to the 5th district in Eastern Kentucky, but even Western Kentucky, they're the ones who are more likely to be impacted by this. So it's not that they're pulling certain benefits out or just reducing funding overall. There was some discussion about that, but they walked away from it. It's really about these sneaky ways of tripping people up and forcing them to lose their coverage. Yep. There's one other way that I want to mention real quickly, which is copays. So right now, Medicaid is really good coverage because there's no cost sharing for the folks who are in it. The idea there is that these are typically folks who are less healthy, and so we want to get them in to seek care, right? We want our people to be healthy. We want them to be treated. Copays are designed not to recoup part of the cost of the care. They're designed to put a barrier between you and that appointment, right? And so the way that they save money is not by necessarily, having people give $5 a copay. It's having people delay that mammogram, having people delay that cancer screening, having people delay their dialysis a little longer. And that's how they save money. And to me, that's one of the cruelest parts of this bill. It's really unconscionable that folks who are already having a difficult time making appointments because of transportation issues, unpredictable work schedules, taking care of loved ones, are going to be penalized even further when it comes to accessing life-saving treatment. It's really frustrating.
Yeah. And I think the cynical kind of take on this and looking at what other states have done, because Arkansas and other states have done some work requirements right in the past, it just doesn't work, doesn't get more people into the workforce. If that's what you're saying, you're trying to get these able-bodied folks who've been hanging out in their basement playing video games.
We have a 30-year record of work requirements in SNAP, and a mountain of studies has shown that they are completely ineffective at getting people into jobs, at getting people to take more hours, at reducing poverty. They're extremely effective, though, at taking away benefits from folks. We've been dealing with that since 1996 in SNAP, and it would be a shame for us to move that into Medicaid.
It's almost like they don't want to know. They don't want to do the analysis to figure out what, or they just don't want to talk about it. So one more question for me, and then I'll turn back to Dr. Jones, which I like to say because it makes me think of Indiana Jones, really. So I see here, I was a little confounded. I was very confused. The Kentucky Hospital Association issued a press release thanking by name the representatives, including Garland Hale Barr IV, aka Andy Barr, and Hal Rogers, and Jamie Comer and Guthrie, all these folks who voted for that bill and they thanked them for saving or preserving Medicaid, which is not exactly how you and I are describing and how this conversation about Medicaid cuts is, are we in the upside down here? What are they talking about, Dustin?
So they're talking about a couple very specific policies. Before the Energy and Commerce Committee came out with their version of the cuts, there was a lot of discussion around doing a couple of things. The one that two in particular would have really hurt them. One is essentially capping how much the federal government pays toward Medicaid. So Medicaid's a shared state and federal responsibility. In Kentucky, the federal government picks up the lion's share of it, about 80 cents on the dollar. And so capping that would have been really detrimental to their bottom line. Additionally, there are what are called state-directed payments. These are essentially supplemental payments that the state makes to hospitals. Medicaid is traditionally a very low payer. It pays much less than commercial insurance. What these state-directed payments do is they make up the difference between the Medicaid rate and the commercial insurance rate. So for a few years now, Medicaid has essentially been paying the same as, your and my employer-sponsored insurance. And that's been very lucrative for hospitals. There was some discussion about taking that away, like banning that practice, because it's a lot of money. In Kentucky, it's going to end up being around $5.5 billion out of our $20 billion Medicaid budget. So you can imagine hospitals are looking at that $5.5 billion maybe going away and really kind of shaking in their boots. So they chose not to go that route. And so I think what we're seeing here is hospitals saying, well, thank you. We're really glad that we get to keep that money. I think that their relief is maybe a little short-sighted. I think that there are certainly financial concerns that stem from 350,000 people becoming uninsured in Kentucky. And I worry for rural hospitals, frankly. I'm not sure that in parts of the state, like, again, Eastern Kentucky, where 44% of the population is covered by Medicaid, where nearly half of births are covered by Medicaid, where a large portion of substance use disorder treatments are covered by Medicaid. When those people don't have health insurance, when they're not paying for care anymore, that's going to have a really substantial impact on the bottom line, particularly of small, rural, vulnerable hospitals. So, I'm concerned on their behalf about what this might mean for their longevity.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, because it was definitely it was confusing to me. I saw, Representative Garland Hale Barr IV, aka Andy Barr, had tweeted that out, showing how what a champion he was, which again I think really important for people to kind of dig through what's happening here. Kimberly, any final question for Dustin?
I have two statements. Sometimes during this Trump regime, I feel like I was reborn into hell. Really, it feels like that. We should have learned more the first time around. The second thing I want to know is I had asked previously about
Connect.
Yeah, Connect. Just broadly, do you think that's still going to be a thing? Is that still, and that's more or less your people that are making more money.
I think you got muted there, Dr. Jones.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I was just laughing to myself. I do that a lot. Most of the time it's when Aaron calls on me and he's like, Kimberly, are you there? Are you there? So is that still going to be a thing? And then number two, my daughter, who's in the Air Force, now she's in Saudi Arabia. She has a business and we've been buying some property, but we're just a little afraid about the Section 8 of that. She wanted to do affordable, low-income, nice housing. And I told her maybe we might have a better chance right now, instead of investing all the money in that, into some really nice, structured, sober living homes. Do you think that that's still going to be a thing with this bill? And just those two questions. And I've learned so much today. I've been jotting down notes and stuff. This is wonderful. Aaron, thank you for getting him.
Yeah. So on your first question, one of the large ways in which people will lose health insurance is by a failure to extend these enhanced subsidies. So back with the American Rescue Plan Act, and then following that, the Inflation Reduction Act, there were a lot of really great changes that were made to the marketplace. They, it used to be capped so that folks above 400% of the federal poverty level, they wouldn't qualify for subsidies. They removed the cap and basically just said, we're going to make sure you're not paying more than, I think it's 8% of your disposable income on subsidies. And they also improved the subsidy structure so that they were more generous, and it lowered premium costs for people who bought those on the exchange. Unfortunately, they gave that a sunset, right? They gave it a deadline, and that deadline is coming up this year. So there was a lot of push early on to make sure that those get extended, but in the House version of the bill, they did not extend those. So they're going to expire. A cap's going to come back. Subsidies are going to become less generous. And the Urban Institute estimates that about half of the people who are getting health insurance on that exchange are not going to do it anymore. They're going to become uninsured instead. And that's a big deal. So Connect will still be around. It'll still exist, but we'll just have the less generous subsidies that we had before. And we'll have more expensive premiums that people can't afford, at least more expensive than they were, prior to these enhancements. So, it's a real concern. And obviously we're worried that, 47,000 people losing health insurance is going to be a problem in a lot of ways. So that's in addition to the folks who lose Medicaid coverage. CBO put out an estimate today that said about 16 million Americans will lose health insurance from all this, and the marketplace makes up about a third of that. So it's significant. In terms of the question about Section 8 versus sober living homes, I don't want to give anybody business advice, certainly not on the record. I do think Medicaid will still be around. They're not getting rid of Medicaid entirely. So there are still ways in which someone who's covered by Medicaid might be able to have some ability to cover things like that. But Section 8 is not a part of this bill. So far, it has not made it into the budget reconciliation process. Now, the Trump budget, the proposed skinny budget that lawmakers are going to have to actually start writing appropriations bills about, he does suggest steep cuts to Section 8, very steep. So, that's a separate fight. That's a little down the road. But I think there's reason to be worried about, Section 8 and rental assistance in general in America right now.
Yes, I'm here in Louisville, and we need, and this is a very steep number, I believe, we need over 36,000 single family units, whether they be homes, whether they be duplexes. I'm sorry, that's my son coming home. Whether they be duplexes or apartments. And I think this is really pretty much around the country. That's why it takes so long to get on Section 8. Mm-hmm. People are waiting years because they don't have the actual units. So we might just go for both of them, Mr. Dustin.
There you go. Yeah. The Kentucky Housing Corporation came out with a really good study middle of last year that showed that in Kentucky, we currently have a 200,000 unit shortage of housing, not affordable housing, just housing. And by the end of the decade, that's going to hit almost 300,000. So if you ever wonder why home prices are rising so quickly or why rents are getting so high, it's because we just don't have enough supply. We stopped building after the 2007, 2008 housing crisis, and we've never caught up since. And so there's just literally not enough roofs for people to sleep under. And it's something that I think the General Assembly is going to have to do something about, because I don't think Congress is coming to our rescue anytime soon.
No, most definitely not. And my last question for you this evening it's just been wonderful talking to you this evening. Like it's like we could just sit down over a cup of coffee and just discuss the world,
That sounds like a good time.
We talked about two stories earlier. Just want your brief take on it. We talked about Webb leaving the Democratic Party, going to the Republican Party. And then we talked about the new breaking news of Elon Musk saying that all the GOP that, voted for this bill, they need to be fired next November. So what do you think about those two stories that we just briefly?
Well, I'll start by saying KY Policy is a nonpartisan, nonprofit 501c3 organization.
Okay.
I don't have a lot of partisan views on anything. I've worked with Robin Webb before. Look forward to continuing our work with her in the future. We will work with anybody who wants to pass good policy. I think it's interesting that Elon Musk's frustration is really about what this does to the debt and the deficit. That same CBO score that came out today that I mentioned earlier shows that while they're planning on cutting spending by 1.2 trillion, the vast majority of which was through Medicaid, they're planning on reducing revenue by 3.5 trillion. So if you do the math, that's about a $2.4 trillion increase in the national deficit over 10 years. And that's enormous. And there are maybe good reasons to deficit spend, particularly when you're in a downturn. You want to have strong fiscal policy to bounce back from an economic downturn. If you have a real big sort of opportunity in say infrastructure or some type of technological innovation, if you're in a war or a pandemic, those are all perfectly good reasons to deficit spend. I really question whether or not large income tax cuts that are primarily aimed at valuing the wealthy and then are only partially offset through significant cuts to programs that primarily benefit the poor, but also benefit all of us through a sort of more robust healthcare system. That is unsound fiscal policy. It's a really bad idea, and it's going to put us on a worse footing in the future when there is a downturn or when there is a pandemic or God forbid there is a war and we have to deficit spend, that's going to make it much more difficult for us to do that and to be able to afford it in the future. So, I don't agree with a lot of what Doge did or any of it. We actually have a really good tracker if you're interested in seeing the cumulative effect of those actions on Kentucky. But I think he's right that it has a significant impact on the deficit, and for no good reason. No good reason.
Well, I always say people that have those mindsets, and you may have heard it before, right before you got on, they want us sick, dumb, and poor. When people that have those mindsets, it doesn't matter what party, what age range, it doesn't matter. People with those type of mindsets where it's all about me, let me grab up all the money and leave everybody else behind. What do we call that? The haves versus the have-nots. We're the have-nots, Dustin. Unfortunately, we're the have-nots, but we're going to fight our way through it. It has been most definitely a pleasure having you on the show tonight. I know Aaron will probably be calling you back up again. Really, really appreciate it. If there's anything that we ever can do for you, let us most definitely know.
Well, I'll say my pinned tweet on Twitter is that same famous thumbs down from John McCain. And it taught me that when folks around the country speak the truth, they work with data, they're clear, and they fight like hell, we can win big victories. And that was definitely one of them. That was a victory we won for 1.5 million Kentuckians who were covered by Medicaid. So I hope you and your listeners are doing the same.
Most definitely. That's what we're here for. I keep telling Aaron we have to go over my contract, but I forgot I volunteer. So I put my little 2 cents in there to help out. So Dustin, it's been nice talking to you. God bless to you and your family. And we will be seeing you really, really soon.
Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do our call to action. We want you to meet us in Georgetown, Kentucky on Friday. Yes, a D-Day rally to defend our troops. Our friends at Georgetown Resistance are organizing this positive nonpartisan rally at the Georgetown Courthouse Square to mark D-Day and support our veterans. We have a long, proud history of fighting fascists in our nation, and we better remember that if we're going to defend our democracy, Friday at 4 p.m. You can also go on Facebook to D-Day Rally to support our veterans. Once again, that is D-Day Rally to support our veterans. Make sure you go on that Facebook and you can see more about that. Going to do the disclaimer really quickly here. Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State and organized as a 501c4. We are affiliated with the Indivisible Project and the Commonwealth Alliance Voter Engagement, otherwise known as CAVE. And we are also proud members of the Forward Kentucky Network. Progress Kentucky's goal is always to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Please join us next week for our 214th episode. Yes, we got it going on. Aaron will be back in full stride next week. He'll be back in Childsburg, right there near Lexington, Kentucky. So we wish him safe travels back. And we will be joined by the leader of a new organization that has been very visibly pushing back against the Trump MAGA regime in Lexington. It's called Peaceful Bluegrass Resistance. Progress Kentucky has been working with them to organize the upcoming No Kings rally. And we're excited to hear from Peaceful Bluegrass Resistance Craig, Mr. Craig Blair, next week. Episode 213 today was by Parker Williams, and he always does a great job. Now, we did have Aaron at first, but Parker, he came in and saved the day. Nate Orshan wrote and performed our theme songs. You can find more information and music at natosongs.com. That's NATO songs.com. And if you miss our weekly live stream on Facebook or YouTube, audio podcasts and our show notes are always available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and just about wherever you get your podcast. And when you do listen on the pod, please, 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 I beg of you to give us a 5-star review. You know, it helps the algorithms wherever you may listen. It's been a great show tonight. So thankful to have you guys listening to us. And we'll see you back same time next week.